The electrician who stole $350 million in 10 minutes and vanished without a trace. Some crimes are violent, others are chaotic, but the most unsettling crimes are the ones executed with such silence, precision, and intellect that the world doesn't even realize something happened until it's too late. This is the story of one such crime. A theft so clean, so shocking in its scale that it shook financial institutions, embarrassed law enforcement agencies, and left cybercrime experts baffled. It was orchestrated not by a known gangster, nor a cyber warfare unit, nor even a high-profile international hacker. It was carried out by a man nobody saw coming, an ordinary electrician. He wasn't a career criminal. There was no prior arrest, no shady background, no record of fraud, hacking, or violence. By all outward appearances, he was just another quiet, hard-working technician, someone you'd call to fix a fuse or rewire a circuit. But underneath that mundane exterior was a mind quietly observing, quietly learning, and slowly assembling one of the most audacious heists in modern history. In just 10 minutes, this man managed to steal $350 million and disappeared into thin air. No witnesses, no alarms, no physical evidence. The only trace he left behind was an empty vault and a trail of confused investigators. And to this day, years later, he has never been caught. It sounds like the plot of a Hollywood thriller, but it's disturbingly real. What made it possible was not brute force, nor some complex hacking algorithm. It was his deep understanding of infrastructure, electrical systems, internal circuits, surveillance wiring, and digital control units. He didn't just break into a system. He walked through it like he built it himself. Sources say the heist took place inside a heavily fortified financial data center located in a nondescript industrial building in a metropolitan city. The facility managed international wire transfers, secure account data, and handled sensitive transactional systems worth billions. The security protocols were considered foolproof: armed guards, facial recognition, vaults with triple encryption, backup generators, internal surveillance networks. Every single angle was supposedly covered. But they didn't account for one thing: someone who understood the system from the inside out, not from the perspective of a criminal, but from that of the man who installed the wiring, who knew which circuits controlled what, who knew how long the emergency systems would take to kick in, who knew how to make a blackout look like a glitch. And that's exactly what happened. At 2:43 a.m. on a quiet Thursday morning, all lights went out inside the data center. Security footage glitched. Internal logs froze. Power shifted to backup, but for exactly 10 minutes the system went dark. When it came back online, everything looked normal. No alarms had been tripped. No doors had been breached. It wasn't until routine checks hours later that someone realized $350 million had been silently transferred in precise batches to a network of offshore accounts. By the time authorities were alerted, the trail was cold. IP addresses were bounced across continents. Every account used in the theft had already been wiped. The names, the emails, the devices, burner accounts, ghost devices, untraceable. And the prime suspect? The quiet electrician who had worked on that very data center 3 months prior, contracted by a third-party maintenance firm. No one had paid much attention to him at the time. He had the right credentials, clean background checks, and no reason to raise suspicion. But once investigators started digging, they discovered he had vanished. No forwarding address. Phone disconnected. Apartment emptied. Passport expired, but no flight records. It was like he'd erased himself from existence. Some say he planned this for years. Others believe he had help, possibly from someone inside. But what remains undeniable is this: in under 600 seconds, an everyday man walked into a digital fortress and walked out, richer than most drug lords, more elusive than most fugitives, and completely invisible to the world. This story isn't just about money. It's about obsession, patience, genius, and the terrifying possibility that the biggest criminal masterminds of our time might not look like criminals at all. So who was he? How did he do it? And where is he now? Let's rewind and start from the beginning. How his technical expertise gave him access. Others didn't have to the outside world. He was just an electrician. He wore a dusty tool belt, showed up in a dented white van, and fixed everything from faulty wiring to overloaded circuits. But what no one realized, until it was far too late, was that beneath his quiet demeanor and workman's uniform was a mind that had spent years studying, dissecting, and mastering the systems that ran the very institutions we trust with our money. His edge wasn't brute force, nor cutting-edge hacking. It was access. Access that no one thought twice about. After all, who questions the electrician when he walks into a server room with a clipboard and a company badge? That was his genius. Over the years, he'd worked for dozens of buildings, data centers, financial firms, and secure facilities as a subcontractor through third-party companies. Each time, he wasn't just doing the job he was hired for, he was learning. He was mapping out floor plans, studying which cables controlled which systems, noting how long backup power took to activate, memorizing which wires carried alarm signals, and where they could be silently severed without triggering detection. He had learned something that few people ever stop to think about. Every security system, no matter how advanced, is powered by electricity, and every electrical system has vulnerabilities. When he was assigned to the data center 3 months before the heist, it seemed routine. The facility was undergoing maintenance, and the firm he subcontracted for was responsible for replacing and upgrading several key circuit systems, including backup power modules, cable management infrastructure, and relay boards. For 2 weeks, he worked inside one of the most secure financial buildings in the region. Every step was logged. Every entry required clearance. But since he wasn't seen as a threat, just the electrician, he was given access to places that even mid-level employees weren't allowed to enter. He didn't need to break in. He was already inside. What he saw and what he installed during those 2 weeks laid the foundation for what would come next. Hidden beneath cable trays, in panels no one would check again for years, he made subtle changes. Nothing too drastic. Nothing that would set off alarms. He rerouted small circuits, added hidden relays, and most importantly, inserted a timed bypass system that could cut primary power and delay backup systems for exactly 10 minutes. This wasn't a rush job. He knew exactly what he was doing. He also understood how the internal server logs worked. He knew how long a system could be offline before logging errors became suspicious. He also knew that during routine testing, short outages were common. So a 10-minute window wouldn't raise questions, as long as the timing was right. But his real mastery lay in how he made his exit invisible. During the final stage of his maintenance work, he removed any identifying markers from the relay switches he installed. He used untraceable components, purchased through third-party vendors under fake names, and paid in cash. He left no fingerprints, no serial numbers, and no camera footage, because he also knew exactly where every camera was wired and what blind spots they had. He was, in many ways, the architect of the very system he sabotaged. Investigators later discovered a chilling detail. He had built a custom circuit board, a small, thin device the size of a chocolate bar that was inserted deep inside a wall-mounted electrical panel. That board controlled everything. It was the trigger. Activated remotely via a short-range signal, it could cause a full system blackout, reroute backup power, and keep data logs frozen for 10 minutes. Exactly enough time to reroute and authorize a massive digital transfer. That board wasn't found until 6 months after the heist. By then, it was too late. What shocked experts most was how elegantly simple the plan was. No advanced malware, no brute force server breach, just an understanding of the human assumptions behind security. That the systems work, that technicians are harmless, and that no one would ever be smart or patient enough to exploit the physical layer of a digital fortress. But he was. And that's what made him unstoppable. He didn't just steal money. He rewrote the rulebook on what a modern heist could look like. No guns, no team, no chase. Just one man, with the right tools, and the inside knowledge no one else had. Step-by-step breakdown of the 10-minute, $350 million theft. It was precisely 2:43 a.m. when the lights blinked once inside the data center. At first glance, it seemed like a glitch, barely noticeable. But it wasn't just the lights. Every system, from the internal network to the vault surveillance, froze. 10 minutes later, everything was back online. Nothing appeared stolen, broken, or breached. But by then, $350 million had vanished. This is how he did it, minute by minute. 02:43 a.m. The trigger hidden. Deep inside a maintenance panel on the third sublevel, a small custom-built circuit board received a short-range signal. This signal, most likely transmitted from a nearby building rooftop or parked van, initiated a silent cascade. The board cut primary power to critical systems and rerouted energy flow, forcing the entire facility to switch to backup mode. But here's the trick. The board also delayed the backup systems using a timed bypass. It was set for exactly 10 minutes. Security cameras froze, data logs paused, server clocks halted. For the outside world, the systems still looked like they were operating, but internally, the fortress was blind. 02:43:30 a.m. Entry into the network. Because the power delay was physical, not digital, none of the cybersecurity systems were triggered. Firewalls were down, encryption layers were inactive. The system wasn't hacked in the traditional sense, it was simply asleep. He had already embedded a small device months earlier in the server room, a disguised port extender behind an inactive switchboard. Through this, he gained temporary local access without needing to touch the actual network interface. A laptop, possibly remotely connected or pre-installed inside the wall, interfaced with the main transaction server. It was connected through a physical cable, completely off the radar of network surveillance. 02:44:10 a.m. Authentication bypass. He knew the system's multi-layered authentication structure, biometric ID, dual admin passwords, and a rotating security token. But because the system was in emergency mode and half awake, these protocols were also paused. Months earlier, during maintenance, he had observed and likely cloned one admin's login procedure. It's suspected that he used a captured token cycle, paired with a mirrored fingerprint scanner planted during maintenance, to emulate full access rights. In less than a minute, he was inside the core transaction control panel. 02:45 a.m., initiating the transfers. Here's where his planning shone brightest. Instead of one massive transfer, which would trigger international banking alarms, he split the $350 million into hundreds of microtransactions, each under regulatory thresholds, directed through a chain of shell corporations with offshore accounts. Each transfer took only milliseconds. Most went to accounts in countries with weak financial oversight. A few were rerouted through cryptocurrencies, instantly converted and tumbled through privacy mixers, vanishing into the digital ether. By the time 5 minutes had passed, more than $200 million had already moved. 02:48 a.m. Diversion protocol. Just in case anything had gone wrong or someone noticed early, he had a diversion built in. A fake IP log was injected into the network to make it seem as if a group of Eastern European hackers had breached the system via malware. It was sloppy by design, meant to confuse, not cover. If authorities caught wind of it early, they'd chase the wrong trail for weeks. They did. 02:50 a.m. Final sweep. With the transfer complete, the embedded laptop ran a custom script, deleted all local logs from the past hour, wiped the physical port's signature, powered down the hidden access port, activated a surge in the circuit board that fried itself completely, leaving only burnt components behind all in under 2 minutes. 02:52 a.m. Restoration. The bypass timer ran out. Power fully restored, servers rebooted, security systems came back online, surveillance resumed, everything looked normal, no alarms were triggered, no emergency signals sent, and crucially, no one inside the building had any idea what had just occurred. 02:53 a.m. Silence. The building was asleep. The street was empty. The van, if there was one, was gone. The man behind the heist was likely already in another city, or even another country. The perfect crime. 10 minutes, no weapons, no masks, no fingerprints, just a man with intimate knowledge of infrastructure impeccable timing, and absolute precision. By the time employees began their day at 9 a.m., the money had already disappeared across 6 different continents. It took 3 days for the financial institution to realize what had happened. By then, it was already history. His escape plan and how he vanished without a trace. The theft was a masterpiece, but the disappearance was even more brilliant. Stealing $350 million in 10 minutes without tripping a single alarm was the first half of the plan. The second, and arguably more difficult part, was escaping without leaving a trail. No camera footage, no digital footprints, no confirmed identity. And that's exactly what he did. By the time anyone realized the money was gone, he had already erased himself from the world. A ghost. Before the crime. His planning didn't start the day of the heist, it began years earlier. Investigators later discovered that the man they believed to be the Electrician wasn't just using a fake name, he was using an entirely manufactured identity. The passport, driver's license, tax records, even social media accounts, all forged, built slowly over time to appear as real as any citizen. He had created the illusion of a normal life, a rented apartment, utility bills, a modest bank account, and a clean employment history. His name appeared on company payrolls through third-party contractors, subcontracted through layers of firms that didn't keep long-term employee records. Once the heist was complete, he simply walked away from that identity, and no one has seen him since. Disguised exit route authorities searched for camera footage, license plates, transit logs, anything that might show where he went in the hours after the crime. They found nothing. Why? Because he never left in a way they expected. According to one theory, he didn't flee the country in a panic after the theft. Instead, he left quietly several hours before the breach, letting the entire operation trigger remotely. That way, by the time the system shut down and the money was transferred, he was already out of range, possibly in another state, or even across the border. Another theory suggests that he never physically triggered the breach himself at all. The circuit board had its own internal clock and may have been programmed weeks in advance. That means he could have left days earlier, leaving the entire 10-minute operation to execute itself while he was long gone. Both scenarios explain why no vehicle was seen leaving, no border alerts were triggered, and no face was caught on security footage. He didn't run. He disappeared before the chase even began. Cash, crypto, and offshore accounts. After the theft, the $350 million was routed to a network of offshore accounts spanning multiple countries with strict banking secrecy laws, but that was only part of the plan. Within hours, large chunks were converted into cryptocurrency using automated trading bots and anonymous wallets. The funds were split into thousands of micro-wallets, many routed through darknet tumblers and mixers that made tracing them nearly impossible. By the time law enforcement agencies attempted to follow the digital trail, it had already been laundered through at least 18 different jurisdictions, many with no extradition treaties or cooperation with financial regulators. Some believe he used proxies or hired cyber experts from the dark web to manage the transfers after his initial withdrawal, paying them through anonymous crypto transactions. Either way, the trail was effectively cold within 48 hours. Vanishing into the world. No one knows what he looks like today. If he changed his appearance, grew a beard, lost weight, dyed his hair, he could be anyone, anywhere. And with the kind of money he had, disappearing was not only possible, it was guaranteed. Some experts believe he might be living in a remote coastal town in Southeast Asia, or perhaps among digital nomads blending in with expats in Eastern Europe. Others suspect he went underground entirely, living off the grid, surviving with cash, gold, or crypto. But one thing is certain, he never surfaced. There have been no signs of lavish spending, no unusual activity, no clues. If he's alive, he's either spending very wisely or not spending at all. The vanishing point. There are only a handful of individuals in the world capable of executing such a crime, technically, financially, and psychologically, but fewer still could escape afterward without a trace. He didn't just disappear from the system, he outsmarted it. To this day, there are no warrants with a known name, No face to put on wanted posters, and no confirmed sightings. Only a nickname whispered in cybersecurity circles: the Ghost Electrician. Global manhunt, police failure, and the ongoing mystery. When the $350 million heist came to light, it didn't just shock a nation. It rattled governments, financial institutions, and intelligence agencies around the globe. This wasn't a cybercrime committed by a faceless group in a dark room, nor a traditional robbery. It was the work of a single man, a former electrician, who had done what most believed was impossible: exploit the system from the inside and vanish without a trace. And then came the manhunt. The global response. The initial response was chaotic. The financial institution that had been targeted tried to contain the news, but once international regulators were notified, the story exploded. Interpol issued a global red notice. The FBI, Europol, and multiple intelligence agencies joined the hunt, creating a joint task force dedicated to tracking down the mastermind behind the 10-minute heist. Dozens of countries were alerted. Bank accounts were frozen. Shell companies were investigated. Hundreds of IP addresses linked to the money trail were flagged, and cybersecurity teams scoured the dark web for any hint of the culprit. But it was all too late. Chasing shadows. The first problem investigators encountered was simple but devastating. They didn't know who they were looking for. The man had used an alias from the start: fake ID, fake credentials, fake employment records. His fingerprints weren't in any criminal database. His face was never captured on camera. Even his accent was described differently by people who had met him during past jobs. Some said he sounded American, others thought he was Eastern European, and a few claimed he was fluent in Spanish or Arabic. It quickly became clear: he had studied how to be forgettable. Every layer of his identity had been built with surgical precision. No real name, no digital history, no biological trace. In effect, the world's largest manhunt had no target. The investigation breaks down. Despite millions of dollars and thousands of man-hours poured into the search, the investigation began to stall. Leads dried up. Forensic analysis of the burnt circuit board yielded no serial numbers. The servers he had accessed were wiped clean beyond recovery. Even the small apartment he had rented under a fake name had been vacated weeks before the heist. There were no signs of forced entry, no eyewitnesses, no evidence left behind. The media began calling it the perfect crime. The press spun wild theories. Was he a rogue government agent? A whistleblower? Was the heist an inside job? Or worse, was it a test run for something bigger? Public pressure mounted. Politicians demanded answers, but the agencies had nothing. The heist that should have left a digital hurricane had left behind only silence. False leads and copycats. In the years following the crime, authorities arrested over 24 individuals in connection with the heist, but none were the real perpetrator. Some were small-time hackers trying to replicate the methods. Others were scam artists claiming insider knowledge to extort money from banks or law enforcement. At least 3 documentaries, dozens of podcasts, and 2 streaming series were launched around the case. Yet none could provide answers, only speculation. One theory even suggested the man had died shortly after the heist, taking the secret and the money with him. But no body was ever found. No suspicious deaths linked back to him. Just nothing. A case gone cold. Today, years later, the case remains officially open but is considered inactive. That's law enforcement speak for. We've got nothing left to chase. The global task force has long since disbanded. The original investigators have moved on. Some believe he is still out there, rich, free, and living quietly in a place no one is looking. Others suspect he re-entered society under yet another fake identity, perhaps not even touching the money, simply existing, watching the world search for a ghost. The most chilling part? He hasn't struck again. He didn't need to. The legend lives on. The ghost electrician has become something of an underground myth, part urban legend, part modern-day outlaw. He's referenced in cybersecurity training seminars. He's studied in criminology classes. Financial institutions quietly rewrote their physical infrastructure protocols because of him. Yet no one really knows his name, or his face, or what he wanted. Maybe it was all about the money, maybe it was about proving a point, or maybe he just wanted to disappear, and he did.